In December 2020, a man decided to explore the deepest cave on Earth, reaching an incredible depth of 7,257 feet. This depth is so massive that you could fit 2.5 Burj Khalifas inside it. 9 months later, his body was found hanging more than 3,600 feet deep in the cave. This is the heart-wrenching story of Sergei Kozeev. Veryovkina Cave, recognized as the deepest cave on Earth, plunging to an astonishing depth of 7,257 feet. Russian adventurer Sergei Kozeev was well aware of this and dedicated over a year preparing for an expedition into its depths. However, what he couldn't foresee was how the cave would ultimately trap him, leaving him cold, drained and immobile, far from his family, who had no clue where he was. Nestled in the Gagra mountain range of Abkhazia, Georgia, are 4 of the world's deepest caves, with Veryovkina being the most formidable. Its treacherous conditions demand months of planning by experienced caving teams. No one has ever dared to explore it alone since its discovery in 1968. Caving expeditions here are team efforts, making the adventure safer and more enjoyable. The cave has 6 designated camps where explorers can rest, eat, and regain strength before pushing further into the depths. Reaching the maximum depth of 7,257 feet typically requires 3 to 4 days to descend and another 3 to 4 days to climb back up. Sergei Kozeev, a 37-year-old adventurer from Vesyoloy village, Russia, first learned about the Veryovkina Cave from his local community. He followed reports of the latest expedition in September 2018 by the renowned Veryovkina Caving. This group managed to descend 6,900 feet before heavy flooding forced them to abandon their mission. Sergey, an adventure enthusiast with a love for extreme sports, was undeterred. He had recently taken up caving, seeking a purpose to overcome his existential struggles. Learning about Veryovkina reignited his spirit, pushing him to prepare for over a year. On October 31, 2020, Sergey told his wife he would be leaving for the mountains in search of life's meaning, though he never disclosed his exact destination. The next day, he drove for hours to Abkhazia, Georgia, seeking the official permissions typically required for Sestuna. Armed with maps and notes from previous explorers, he arrived at the cave's entrance, a vast, dark chasm surrounded by rocky cliffs. It appeared menacing and uninviting, yet Sergey pressed on. Dressed in camouflage overalls and sturdy boots, he secured a rope to a rocky outcrop and descended into the void using a lattice descender. The first 1,300 feet were especially dangerous, with vertical drops, tight horizontal tunnels, and rocky obstacles. At times, he crawled on his belly or waded through icy, muddy water. Eventually, Sergey reached the first camp, located 1,247 feet down. Exhausted but relieved, he checked his phone for screenshots of maps and notes, confirming he was in the right place. He rested, changed out of his wet clothes, and ate some food. There he found supplies left behind by the Perovo team during their rushed escape from the 2018 flood. He took what he needed and prepared for the next stage. The next camp, known as Camp 600, was 200 meters deeper from the entrance. Although less challenging than the initial descent, the journey still involved navigating through muddy water, narrow tunnels, and difficult climbs. Upon reaching Camp 600, Sergey felt a surge of joy. It was stocked with even more supplies, including gas for cooking, food, and even a makeshift toilet. He was especially glad to find sleeping bags, knowing he would need proper rest. In the constant darkness, Sergey relied on his energy levels to gauge time, knowing his phone's battery wouldn't last. He rested, ate dinner, and fell asleep, relieved to have made progress. Strangely, instead of continuing his descent the next day, Sergey stayed at Camp 600 not for just one day, but for an entire week. No one knows why. Perhaps the harsh cold wore him down, or he needed extra time to plan his next move. Whatever the reason, this delay marked the beginning of a tragic end. Sergey eventually resumed his descent into the cave, heading toward the next significant point, known as Camp 1000, located 3,280 feet from the cave's entrance. After about a week of rest, he felt fully recharged and ready to push further. His determination was unwavering, despite the challenges he had already faced. However, as he descended deeper, reaching approximately 2,600 feet into the cave, he started shivering uncontrollably. The cave's temperature plummeted rapidly, much like the icy water cascading inside. Without a wetsuit, he was constantly soaked by the freezing water, making every step more torturous. At this depth, the temperature hovered between 4 and 7 degrees Celsius, with humidity reaching a stifling 100%. Faced with the brutal cold, Sergey had 2 logical options: climb back up or return to Camp 600 in hopes of finding an abandoned wetsuit. However, he couldn't choose either. As he rummaged through his gear, a chilling realization dawned on him. He had forgotten to bring clamps or stirrups, essential tools for climbing back up. Trapped by his own oversight, he understood that the only way forward was down. With no other choice, Sergei pressed on, fingers crossed that he might find some much-needed gear at Camp 1000. His descent was grueling, mentally and physically draining, but he managed to reach the camp, utterly exhausted yet somewhat relieved. Unfortunately, his momentary relief quickly turned into despair. After thoroughly searching the camp, he found no wetsuits, stirrups, or any supplies that could offer protection from the freezing cold. Frustrated and desperate, he tossed gear around, hoping for a hidden stash, but his efforts were futile. Defeated and drained, he collapsed to catch his breath. As he rested, an idea sparked in his mind. Perhaps Camp 4,430 feet down might have what he needed. It was a slim chance, but it was better than staying put or giving up entirely. Driven by sheer willpower, Sergei resumed his descent toward the fourth camp. The cold intensified with every foot he dropped, biting into his skin. Worse, he couldn't escape the constant spray of freezing water, leaving him drenched and trembling uncontrollably. His teeth chattered, his limbs quaked, and the rope he clung to felt increasingly harder to grip. At 3,600 feet, Sergei's body could no longer endure the relentless cold. His hands and legs became numb, making even the simplest movement impossible. He tried to operate his descender, but his frozen fingers refused to cooperate. Suspended in the dark abyss, utterly exhausted and freezing, he could feel hypothermia taking over. He realized his fight for survival was over. Resigned to his fate, Sergei drifted into a deep, final sleep. No one was there to hear his desperate cries or offer a helping hand. The relentless cold of the cave seeped into his bones, sapping the last warmth of life. The chilling water surrounded him, freezing his exhausted body in an unforgiving embrace. This is how his story came to an end alone. Back home, Sergei's wife initially thought he was on another one of his solo adventures. He often disappeared for days before returning home, but as weeks passed with no sign of him, she reported him missing. 9 months later, on August 3rd, 2021, a group of speleologists exploring the cave stumbled upon a rope at its entrance. This was highly unusual and dangerous, as an unsecured rope could tempt inexperienced adventurers, including children, to descend into the perilous cave. Following the rope down, they discovered Sergei's decomposed body hanging lifelessly deep within the cave. They found a phone on him and managed to identify him by uploading his photo on Liza Alert, a missing persons app. His wife was soon notified, and local authorities, including the Russian prosecutor's office, were contacted for permission to retrieve his remains. Recovering Sergei's body was no ordinary mission. It required a team of 100 expert climbers due to the cave's unforgiving terrain and depth. The retrieval operation posed extraordinary challenges. They quickly realized that pulling his body out using a stretcher was impossible given the narrow, complex cave system. Leaving his body there wasn't an option either. The cave's water supply eventually flowed into a nearby spring in Gakpi village, whose residents depended on it for drinking water. Moreover, Sergei's wife pleaded for his body to be brought back for a proper burial. The team was left with one grim, unavoidable solution: dismembering Sergei's body and transporting it piece by piece. With his wife's permission granted, they prepared for the harrowing mission. On August 12, 2021, the climbers began their descent into the cave. The retrieval process was arduous, both physically and emotionally draining. After several grueling days, they successfully brought Sergei's remains to the surface on August 16, 2021. This tragic story of Sergei's fatal descent is heart-wrenching and difficult to fathom. But as shocking as his fate was, the story of John Jones and Floyd Collins, who met an even more chilling end, might leave you utterly speechless. Check out that story here. Hope you liked it. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more related videos.